Hey everybody, it's Kristen Mackintosh, the Happy Lawyer here at Schweitzer and Associates, and thank you for attending this month's series on the Happy Lawyer webinar series on All You Need Is Love, caring for an elderly parent from afar. We're going to give you some tips on how to help you better care for your parents when you don't live close by. Again, we do these webinars every month, the last Wednesday of the month at noon. So let me bring up my screen and we'll get started. So as I said, my name is Kristen Mackintosh, and yes, I am a happy lawyer, which is why I'm known as the Happy Lawyer, because I absolutely love what I do, which is helping individuals create unique, personalized estate plans. I don't believe in the cookie cutter approach, one size fits all estate plan. And instead, I believe that every person is unique and personalized, and they deserve their own unique plan. Instead, I save my cookie cutters for the lovely baked goods that I give my clients when we are finished doing a project for them. So today we're going to go through a few topics to help you better handle caring for your parents when you are long distance. We're going to talk about the importance of staying in contact, how to make your visits count, how to better protect your parents from scammers, the legal documents that you need, how to create a contact list, the important information you need to get before an emergency happens, why it's important to know your parents' medical situation, and when and where to recruit help if needed. So first, I want you to know, if you do live away from your parents, that you're not alone. For many years, I lived in Ohio while my parents lived in Maryland, and then moved back home to North Carolina. And as they grew older, I remember worrying constantly about my parents. I worried I wasn't spending enough time with them. I worried that I might never see them again. I worried that something might happen to them. And in fact, something did happen when I was living out of state from my parents, and the fact that my dad had a stroke. And I remember when my mom called to tell me about it, how helpless I felt. And I wanted to jump on a plane and fly out there. And I was told that no, don't come out yet. We need to wait to see what the doctors are going to say. And there were many phone calls between my mom and I, my siblings and I, the doctors and I, and it was just a very trying time. And just, through all of that, and even when I wasn't experiencing that situation, I felt very alone because all of my friends had their parents close by. So they were going over for family dinners. They were, hanging out with their parents. And, it was very hard. But the reality is that I wasn't alone. In fact, nearly 7 million Americans today are caring for their aging parents who are far away. Now think about that, 7 million. That is a huge, huge number. So how are these individuals handling the situation when they can't be close by? Well, first, when you are far away from your parents, contact is very important. I cannot stress that enough. There are so many ways to stay in regular contact now with your parents. And we've got FaceTime, Skype, you can call them on the phone, you can Zoom with them, you can email them, and oh my goodness, you can write them a letter. I don't know about you, but I love getting letters. When I get a handwritten letter, it makes me so happy, as opposed to the bills that I normally have. So if it makes you happy to get a handwritten letter, how do you think it would make your parents feel? Probably very good. So when I went away to college many, many years ago, I decided I was going to call my parents every Sunday. And I followed through with that. And I kept making those Sunday phone calls, even after I graduated from college and went to law school and worked various jobs. And I continued that until I moved back home to Garner, where I'm now 10 minutes away from my parents. And, I just loved hearing their voices when I made those calls or had those FaceTime chats with them, because I could find out what was happening in their lives and we could discuss any problems or concerns that they might be having or I might be experiencing. And even though I'm only 10 minutes away from my parents, I still text my mom at least once a day. I know I probably drive her crazy. And if I don't get a response back by the end of the day, I'm calling her and I'm like, why are you not answering my texts? And she's like, well, I was busy. And I'm like, well, I worry when I don't hear from you. So, you know, although I drive her crazy, I'm sure with the frequency of my text, she knows I'm doing it because I love her. I mean, communication is so important, and it's even more important when you live far away. So maintain that communication with your parents. I mean, one quote I found when I was preparing for this webinar that really hit home is this: we are so busy growing up, we often forget that our parents are growing old. And I know that, especially now that I'm getting older, that quote really hits home for me. I know the time I have left with my parents. I mean, hopefully it's going to be many, many years, but it's a lot shorter than when I was 20. So treasure the time that you have with your parents. Now, why should you stay in contact? Well, in addition to the obvious that your parents love to hear from you and you probably want to hear from them, it builds closer relationships between you and your parents. When your parents hear from you, once a week or every other day, they're more likely to open up to you, to express problems and concerns that they may be having in their lives, versus if they only hear from you once a year. They may not be so. They may want to put on a front and only give you positive, upbeat news on here. It also, when you have that constant contact, it helps calm your own fears and anxiety. Like I said, I'm a worrier, so I was very worried that I wasn't seeing my parents on a regular basis, imagining all kinds of horrible things that might be happening. That's just me. If that's you, by talking to your parents on a regular basis, it helps calm those fears and anxiety. You also are able to learn about developing issues before they become major problems. You can, by asking your parents how they're doing, they can tell you about what their doctor's visits consisted of. They can tell you if they're experiencing falls or having trouble remembering things. And it also, most importantly, it helps fight loneliness. Elderly people, folks, are lonely. They feel very isolated out there, especially if they have lost a spouse or they don't have a spouse. And that's because as we all get older, their friends start unfortunately dying. And so their circle of friendships becomes smaller. And, as children grow up, they move away, they, get jobs, they get busy with their own lives, having their own kids. And so it just creates a lot. They don't hear from people and they spend a lot of time feeling lonely, and people just discount the elderly in this country for whatever reason. It's like they don't want to take the time to sit down and have a chat. They just are like, get to the point and move on. So there are a lot of elderly people who are very lonely out there, which is all the more reason you should stay in contact with them. Now, visits. Let's talk about visits. Visits are very important, but you need to make those visits count when your parents are getting older. The reason it is that when you visit your parents, don't just loll around like you're on vacation. Use your time wisely. Take the time to talk to your parents and engage with them. This is the time to find out about, their health issues. Pay attention to how are they moving? Are they having trouble getting around? Are you noticing any bruises on their body? Are they stumbling or falling? Do they have trouble, like I said, remembering things? Is their house clean? Are repairs needed? So the things that how I break down the categories for you for home visits is quality time. Quality, quality, quality. Talk to your parents, play board games with your parents. If you're going to go sightseeing or visiting places while you're visiting your parents, offer to take your parents along. Find out from your parents, is there a restaurant that you've been dying to go to? And then take your parents to that restaurant. Home safety issues. We talked about the importance of home repairs. Look around, our windows broken, our door locks, not quite locking properly. Now, if you're a handy person, I am not a handy person, but if you were a handy person, then of course I would encourage you to make those repairs while you were visiting. I mean, I have a brother who is very, very handy, and he loves nothing more than to make repairs. I mean, he goes out of his way to find things wrong with my parents' house so he can fix them up. Now, because I'm not a handy person, I instead help my parents find repair people who can come in and fix what's wrong. Also pay attention to safety issues. Are there outside lights that are burned out? Do they have their smoke alarms? And, are the batteries current? Check those batteries, make sure that they're working. You also, as we talked about, you want to do a health check. Again, you're checking for any visible signs of injuries, memory problems. Find out what medications are your parents taking and why they're taking those medications. Are they experiencing side effects from those medications? Then we get into personal hygiene. This is where, you need to pay attention to how your parents are dressing. Did your mom or dad used to always, like, your dad always wore a tie and was always nice, dressed up nice. Mom always wore jewelry and makeup. And now they're showing up in stained clothing. They're not taking good care of themselves. They're not taking baths on a regular basis. If you notice this happening, you need to sit down and find out. Say, hey, I noticed something, mom or dad, that things are a little different. You used to really take care of your parents, but now you don't seem to be doing so. Is it because, you need some new clothes? If so, let's go shopping, or something else going on. You also want to look at the state of their home. Now, I'm not the neatest person in the world, okay? I'll be the first to admit it. So I'm not talking about if you start realizing there's a few, maybe crumbs on the counter. Yes, that may be alarming, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, you used to go to your parents' house and it was fairly neat and put together, but now it's like walking into a hoarder's paradise when you go to your parents' house, or you see that dishes are piled up in the sink and that never used to be the case, or, dust is piling up. That's a possible cause for alarm, and you need to have a conversation with your parents about what's going on and if they need help. So another thing we need to do is we need to talk to our parents about scammers. Now, we are all potential targets of scammers, unfortunately, and some of us may have even fallen victims to some scams. But unfortunately, elderly people are most at risk for being targeted by scammers. Now, why is that? Well, scammers like to target the elderly for several reasons. One, they're often lonely. They're all alone. They just want somebody to talk to. So somebody shoots an email or calls them on the phone and engages them in conversation. And because they're lonely, they want to enter into a dialogue or a relationship with that strange person. Elderly people tend to be very trusting. They want to believe the good in people. They did not grow up in a time where they had to worry about a lot of the dangers that we have grown up with. And unfortunately, they're not always very tech savvy. Now, on a personal note, my mom was almost a victim of a tech scam recently. She was on her computer doing her email when all of a sudden her computer began screeching and noises were blaring, and a message popped up on her screen and it said, "Virus detected, you need to call this number." And she almost called that number, but luckily she thought, something doesn't quite sound right about this. So she called me instead and we talked it through and we realized it was a computer scam. So we were able to, get rid of that message. And luckily, she had called me instead of the scammer because she could have potentially given those individuals access to her computer. And they would have had all of her personal information stored on her computer, passwords, and all of that. And they probably would have asked for her credit card so that they could, fix this non existent virus. So, this is why you need to keep the lines of communication open with your parents. You need to educate them about the scams. Scams are happening daily, they're getting very creative, and you need to talk to them about when you learn about a new scam. You need to talk to your parents about it and why they don't or should not be giving personal information out to strangers. And by keeping those lines of communication open with your parents, then they know that they can contact you about any issue and that you're going to have time for them and you're not going to judge them or criticize them. Again, scams are just happening all the time. The most common scams that target seniors are the fake medical insurance plans. Now, these usually occur during the Medicare enrollment period, October, November, where someone will call up and tell your parents that, hey, I can help you find the right Medicare plan. And goodness knows, I don't know how anybody figures out what Medicare plan to go on because there are so many and it is very complicated. So here is a person offering to help them cut through all of this complication and get the right plan. So they just need date of birth, social security, all this personal information, and a credit card so they can process the application. Well, guess what? This is a scam. This person, it has no interest in, does not work for any type of health plan. They have no interest in helping them. So you need to educate your parents not to give out personal information to people who call them. Instead, save it for if they call somebody. We talked about the tech support scam that goes on. So that's another important one. Money transfer systems fraud. I'm sure we've all gotten that email from the Saudi prince who needs you to accept money, a small amount, and wire a small amount, and then he'll give you like millions of dollars in your bank account. Sounds great, right? Or my favorite, I once got a phone call telling me I'd won a sweepstakes in England. Yay! Who doesn't want to win a sweepstakes? The only problem is I've never been to England. So I certainly have never entered a sweepstakes in England. But you see, a lot of elderly people are worried about money. Even if they have a lot of money, they still worry they're not going to have enough money to take care of themselves or leave to their children when they pass on. So if someone is calling and offering them a windfall, hey, they're very likely to, take that person up on that offer. Finally, we talked about the loneliness that seniors sometimes experience, and that leads us to the romance scams. You've got the person who's wooing your widowed mom or dad, sending them poems, telling them they're the most wonderful person in the world. And as your parent is falling for them, then they start saying things like, I would love to see, but I've got a very sick child who needs an operation. I don't have any money. So your dad or mom wires them money. There is no sick child. There's not even a child, but your parents don't know this. Or they have excuses why they can't come to visit, such as they don't have money for the plane ticket. But if your mom or dad were to wire them money for the plane ticket, then they could, come out and visit them. And what happens is the money gets wired, there's no visit. So you need to impress on your parents that not everyone is trustworthy. And then you need to tell them they should never give money to a stranger without talking to you first. Tell them it's not that you think they're a child or that they're not responsible, but it's just for their own protection because there are bad people out there. Advise them of the risk of talking to people either over the internet or on the phone. No personal information should be given out without careful consideration as to whether or not this is a genuine call. And that brings us to legal documents that you should make sure your parents have in place. This is especially important when you are not close by. And if you yourself do not have these legal documents in place, you should do so because none of us knows what's going to happen. Now, when you're far away, or even if you're close by, there are certain legal documents that every person should have. The first is what's called a healthcare power of attorney. Now, this document enables your parent to appoint someone to make medical decisions on their behalf if he or she is unable to communicate with his or her doctor. For instance, your parent is unconscious, then obviously they can't tell the doctor what they would or would not want to have done to them treatment wise. So in that case, if there was a healthcare power of attorney, the doctor could go to the agent and the agent could advise them as to the appropriate medical treatment. Along with that is the living will. This is a document where your parent states what he or she would like done as far as life-saving measures, whether their heart should be resuscitated, if the heart stops beating, or if they should be hooked up to a respirator, or a ventilator rather, if their lungs are having trouble breathing. Emergencies such as this, when these occur, by having what they would want done listed in the living will, it helps the child or the agent be able to direct the doctors, and it alleviates some of the guilt and worry if you're making the right decision. So it's a very important document to have in place. Finally, you have your financial power of attorney. This is similar to a healthcare power of attorney, except that a financial power of attorney enables your parents to appoint somebody to make financial decisions on their behalf if they're not able to do so. Now, as long as they're able to make those financial decisions on their own, they will continue to do so, the same as with the healthcare power of attorney. However, these are documents that I tell my own clients, I hope you're never, ever going to need them, but that we need to get them done now while you don't need them, because when the occasion arises that we will need these documents, if you haven't already executed them, it may be too late at that time. Now, you need to talk with your parents about who you should call in the case of an emergency. Now, you probably already know what family members should be notified, okay? But you also need to know the contact information for your parents' doctors, their pharmacy, their minister or priest, if they have one. Do they have a caregiver? How do you get in contact with that person? Who are their close friends that they want to be notified? And it's a good idea to get the contact information for their neighbors as well. And you want to not only ask them for the contact information, you want to write it down, and you want to either keep it in a binder or some type of notebook so that it's easily accessible in case an emergency does arise. Again, we talked about the reason you want to have these contacts are these are also people that you can contact if you're ever concerned about your parents. When you're long distance and you can't reach your parents and you're calling, and no one's answering the phone, and you're sitting there all worried because you're like, mom and dad always answer their phone. Why are they not answering their phone? Well, if you have a friend or neighbor's phone number, you can call that friend or neighbor who lives close by to your parents and tell them what's going on and ask them if they would mind going over and checking on your parents. Maybe it's as simple as the phone got knocked off the hook and they just don't realize that. Or worst case scenario, there's a medical emergency. Or maybe your parents, have told you that they're not feeling well and, they're lonely. You can use this contact list to arrange for people to bring them meals, to go over and visit with your parents. Or maybe you just need help finding resources for your parents. Well, the best way to find resources is to go through somebody who has already used the particular resource or know someone who has had need of that resource. I mean, yes, we can all Google, but Google's just a stare away. It's just going to list you a business that just lists their services, but you have no way of knowing if it's a good company or a bad company. So by going through a friend or a neighbor or somebody who lives in your parents' community, they can help guide you to the appropriate resource that is going to be most helpful to your parents. Along with the making of that contact list, you need to collect important information because you need to be prepared before an emergency happens. Because when an emergency happens, your mind is going to be on 10 or more different things. You're not going to be focusing on who am I supposed to contact? Oh my gosh, I don't know my parents' medical condition. You don't want to be in a position where the paramedic is calling you long distance and telling you your parents are in a dire medical condition and asking you what medications do your parents take? Who are their doctors? Well, this is why, folks, we need to have a binder or a notebook that not only lists the contact information, but also list important information about your parents. You need to have your parents' medical information and their medical history in this booklet. What medicines are they taking? Why are they taking those medicines? Do they have insurance? Where is their life insurance policy? Where is their health insurance? Where is their car insurance, home insurance? Who are their agents? Where are the copies of the policies located? What utilities do your parents pay? Do they pay those utilities by having it withdrawn from their bank account every month, or do they receive a bill and write out a check? You also need to find out about their finances. Where are their banks? Where's their checking accounts? Where are their savings accounts? Do they have a financial planner? Do they have investments? These are important information. You don't necessarily need to know the amounts, but you just need to know the locations in case you need to reach out to those financial resources to care for your parents. You also need to know whether or not they have estate planning documents. Do they have a will? Do they have a healthcare power of attorney, living will, durable power of attorney? If so, where are the originals? Do they have copies of those documents? Now, I always make copies of the signed estate planning documents that I keep in my files, and I encourage my clients to always give a copy of their will to their executor, as well as give a copy of their healthcare power of attorney, living will, and durable power of attorney to their agents. But you just need to make sure where those documents are, because again, when an emergency happens, it's going to take too much of your time and effort for you to scramble around trying to find those documents. You need to know your parents' medical situation. Now, since you cannot see them every day, when you live far away, you need to keep on top of their situation. You need to ask them about their health issues and concerns. Find out, how are they feeling? Are they having any aches and pains? When was their last doctor's visit? When's their next scheduled doctor's visit? Hey, I know you, and when they do have a doctor's visit, you should follow up a day, shortly thereafter, either that day or a day or two later, and find out what happened at that doctor's visit. You need to ask them if they've experienced any falls, or, if they're having trouble with anything, that's going on. Pay attention when you're talking to them. Are they starting to get forgetful? No, I'm not talking, forgetting where their keys are, because hey, I do that all the time. I'm talking about if they can't remember names and they can't remember certain things that have happened in their life, that may be a cause for concern. Not always, we all are a little forgetful at times, but you just need to pay attention and really listen to your parents and see, are they acting the way they used to act? Or, should you, talk to them about, concerns that you're noticing. And lastly, you need to know when and where to recruit help for your parents. When you're far away, you can't be there immediately to take care of your parents' needs. It may take you a few minutes, a few hours, a few days to get to your parents, depending on how far away you live. So this is where the contact list that we talked about earlier is very helpful. Do not be afraid to reach out to the friends, faith leaders, and doctors that are on that list to find out what resources there are that may be able to help your parents when you can't be there to assist them on a daily basis. There are just some of the services that we're talking about is if you're noticing, or your parents are saying, what, I keep forgetting to eat, or I don't have time to, cook, or I just don't feel like cooking anymore. Perhaps you want to, arrange for Meals on Wheels to come. Come visit them. And Meals on Wheels, not only do the volunteers actually deliver the meals, they also in turn will a lot of times sit down and visit with the individuals. So that kind of not only meets the food need, it also sometimes helps combat the loneliness that we talked about. Are they having trouble with falling, or did they recently have a stroke or some other condition where perhaps they need a caregiver to come in a couple of hours a day to sit with them and to help them out with small daily tasks? Again, are they having trouble keeping up with maintaining a clean house? Is house cleaning just becoming too much? Then maybe you want to arrange for a house cleaning service to come out once a week or once a month to help your parents. Adult daycare is another big one. I know that was a huge lifesaver for my mother when my dad had his stroke, because at the time she was working full time. And although he had a caregiver who stayed with him during the day, he pretty much was just sitting in front of the TV and he was very isolated. But by having him go to adult daycare 2 days a week, it made an amazing difference in his mental well-being, because all of a sudden he had the socialization, he got to participate in crafts and games and art activities, and not to mention the food on there. So it was just a great outlet for him. So that's another resource to look into. So I want to thank you for your time. Hopefully I've given you some useful tips that you can use in caring for your elderly parents when you can't be there. And if you know anybody who is dealing with this situation and is feeling overwhelmed or concerned, feel free to pass this webinar on to them. You can always reach out to me if you have any questions. Again, I'm Kristen Mackintosh, the Happy Lawyer at Schweitzer and Associates. Our website is nclegalcounsel.com. My email is kmackintosh@nclegalcounsel.com. I do these webinars every month, the last Wednesday of the month at noon. So be on the lookout for the next upcoming webinar. Also, if you like us and you want some more tips about estate planning and this topic in general, feel free to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we do have a YouTube channel, The Happy Lawyer NC, where this webinar and other webinars are posted, as well as weekly videos, short little videos with tips that I post on there. So again, thank you so much for your time. Have a great day. And as I always say, as the Happy Lawyer, stay happy.